When it comes to decision making, we tend to think we either fall into the category of being too emotional or too rational. And indeed, we tend to classify people as such. We'd say, yeah, that person is an emotional person, or yeah, that person is a rational person. Almost like there's a divide, and almost camps on both sides on the spectrum, and you're either one or the other. But the truth is, we are actually, as human beings, evolved to be able to tap into both on equal footing. The most rational people can be very emotional, and the most emotional people can also be very rational. Because both emotions and reason, they exist to serve very different but specialized functions to help us survive and really to help us grow as human beings. Now, emotions are really there to help us tap into the immediacy of the now, to look at our immediate gratifications of our feelings, our desires, our wants. Whereas when it comes to reasoning, that's more about looking after and safeguarding our long-term interests and really our welfare and prospective future. When it comes to emotional decision-making, it's all about us satisfying how we feel in a certain moment. If we're feeling sad and we engage in that, we're trying to make ourselves feel good. If we're seeking pleasure, same thing. Whereas when it comes to rational decision-making, we tend to take a more long-form way of actually thinking. We consider all the options of things in a very calculated way, very meticulous, and in all its consideration, sometimes we're very incapacitated with all the things we're thinking about. And when you think about people who are too emotional, it tends to carry a very negative connotation because, again, if we are only emotional in our decision-making, and emotions are indeed very overpowering according to psychology, then we'd only be focusing about how we feel in a certain moment and making decisions along that in the seeking of instant gratification, we actually overlook our long-term welfare as well. So, for example, if we only want to do things that made us feel good, then potentially we can actually become very unproductive and perhaps really give up on our own self-improvement. If we only want to, for example, eat certain foods and just eat like there's no tomorrow, would be incredibly unhealthy and really find ourselves in this spiral of despair. So long-term thinking is very important. But as much as we give negative connotations and emotions has its place too. For example, in certain contexts, there is a requirement to act with immediacy. If, let's say, hypothetically, you were in a traffic situation, you're in a car, and let's say there's an oncoming car suddenly. In that moment, if you were to think rationally, calculating the velocity of the other car whilst considering all the possibilities of the course of actions that you could take, you might be too slow. That is a very dangerous situation that requires you to act out of instinct and perhaps fear. In that situation, your fear of a collision might be the only thing that makes you act fast and saves you. So there is an important component of actually acting with immediacy. At the same time, emotions, according to psychologists, also allows us to really interact socially and make very important social decisions. Our ability to feel love, connection, and really all the spectrums of human emotions allows us to really make the most human decisions that we could never make, and is the only thing separating us from computers and algorithms. But the most beautiful thing that most people overlook is that actually there is a very important bridge between both emotions and reason. And according to scientists, we would not be able to make any decisions if we don't actually have the ability to exercise both. Now, there's a very famous injury in history. It's a person called Phineas Gage. He had a metal rod actually go all the way up into his brain, and surprisingly, he survived, despite the fact that his prefrontal cortex was more or less destroyed. Now, that part of your brain, among other things, is in charge of the interaction between reason and emotions. And because of that, because it was severed, he was able to act very rationally. He could do maths and really engage in basic cognitive function, but he was unable to make any decisions at all because he was not able to access that emotional part of his brain. And he was also not able to have any social interactions with practically anybody. And so it really shows you that actually we're evolved to have both, and that is a precondition of decision making. If you don't have the ability to have them both, you essentially can't decide on anything. You'd basically be incapacitated. So the best way forward, according to psychologists, is actually to know how to use both, but to keep both in balance. It's very easy oftentimes to be either too rational or too emotional, especially being too emotional, as psychology has revealed that emotions tend to be very overpowering. But the best way forward is actually to realize that you have to exercise both. The best decisions in life actually require you to tap into how you feel about them and to fact check those feelings against how you should think about them, how these decisions actually affect you in the future as well. And when you're able to actually balance both and utilize both, that presents the best chance to make the best decisions in life. And so it is a very beautiful thing. And we tend to classify ourselves as one or the other, but the truth is, we can actually exercise both. And instead of actually being very emotional or very rational, we should indeed be both and actually utilize both.